some businesses operate pan-Africa and understand how things work. But if you're a company that's from Europe and you've just launched a business in Tanzania, it's going great, and congratulations, you've collected $1 million worth of Tanzanian shillings.
Yes. No.
You can't just like call up your banker in the city and be like, hey, can you give me a price? It's complicated. And that's why we have like what I call our full stack treasury solution, which means we'll be able to settle you locally, or we'll be able to get you whatever currency you want in the location that you want it, so that you don't have to deal with that friction yourself.
So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Aaron. It's a pleasure to have you here. Tech Safari Summit 2025. We have the pleasure to be with Aaron, CFO at PawaPay. How has it been so far this morning?
Well, it's really nice to be here, Yannick. And I have to say, this is one of the nicest events that I've been to on the continent. Like, the whole setup is beautiful location, great vibe, lots of interesting people, and plenty of time to like walk around and meet other very cool companies who are doing things here. So yeah, we're having a great
That's
time.
great. That's great. We appreciate that. And so the topic of this summit is, as you know, like market expansion, right? So we're gathering a lot of tech leaders, executive founders, trying to kind of like wrap our head around that topic. And you work at PawaPay. PawaPay, I think, is a big player into market expansion, facilitating market expansion. We'll talk about that right now. So maybe just to start our conversation, just tell us a bit more about yourself, and especially what do you do at PawaPay? And then I have some more specific questions regarding like your Africa journey so far.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm the CFO at PawaPay. I've been in the role for coming up on 2 years now. And prior to that, I was a banker. I was working in tech in the shipping industry, but I really feel like I found one of the coolest companies on the planet to work at. So just to tell you, like, I'll give you a little background on PawaPay. We're one of the biggest payment companies in Africa. We focus on mobile money, which is the predominant way that individuals transact and buy goods and services in sub-Saharan Africa. And within that, we're definitely the biggest. We're live today in 20 countries, and we process anything from 4 to 4.5 million transactions per day. The company's been going for about 5 years, and actually this week, and it's been great to be here with so much of the team, we've celebrated our 2 billionth transaction of all time, which is an amazing accomplishment for the business and for the team that made that possible.
And just 1 year prior to that, it was like 1 billion, right? So you almost...
Yeah, so it took us 4 years to get to 1 billion, and it took us 11 months to get to 2 billion.
Okay, so amazing growth story. You will tell us more. So PawaPay is enabling people, okay, to pay and get paid with mobile money. How true is that statement, and how can you complement on that?
So I think the way to think about it is, if you like take a little bit of a step back and look at mobile money on the continent. I mean, first of all, this is I always say it, but one of the biggest economic and financial success stories of the 21st century. When you think that 20 years ago, mobile money didn't exist, and most of sub-Saharan Africa was a cash-based economy. And today, in this short time, less than a couple of decades, you now have more than 1 billion wallets live on the continent, and more than $1 trillion transacted in mobile money every single year. And it's still growing 10-15% a year. And it's really emerged as the preferred payment mechanic for people who live in Africa. Now, PawaPay's role here is to say, like, look at this incredible technology that was developed and nurtured and grown on the continent. And we sit there as a layer which can connect merchants, whether in Africa or operating pan-Africa or operating globally, to this ecosystem, the real financial infrastructure of Africa. So the idea is that a merchant can connect to us by one API, basically the technical connection. And then sitting behind that, we're integrated to around 50 of the biggest mobile money operators or mobile wallets on the continent. And it means that you get like an instant access to 20 countries and 80 or 90% of the wallets on the continent.
Okay, so let me just stop here. 50 mobile money operators in 20 countries. So what have you learned along that journey about African complexity, how the different markets can differ, and how do you make sense of all of that when you have to kind of like build a simple product for your clients?
Yeah, I think actually your last point is kind of the right starting point,
Okay.
which is a simple product for the clients. So for a long time, our mantra has been to remove friction, to make it easy for you to do your business. And it's taken us a long time to get to this piece, right? You can imagine that we have to get licenses in all of the markets. We have to set up companies in all of the markets. We have to do the technical integration with these big multinational
Yeah.
quasi like state style companies in all of these markets, bank accounts, local people. There's a lot of infrastructure and work that's gone into it to make it happen, and to make it really a simple proposition for you or your company, whether you're like one business selling t-shirts online in Kampala, or you're a big global media company and want to access the entirety of the continent. Um, I think like in terms of what we've learned along that way is one, to be patient, to do things in the right way, to be really true to our own values as a company. So to focus on transparency, to be accountable, to be a good quality operator, and kind of put the merchant experience first, and then to work well within local contexts. So we have a lot of expertise when it comes to the technical aspects of doing mobile money. We have a really good understanding of doing business around the continent, but we always have local people on the ground in every country where we operate. And we work really hard to build those relationships with the stakeholders, whether they're the regulators, the central bank, or the revenue authorities, or the banks, the banking infrastructure and local industry as well.
So we were talking about it recently that you've traveled a lot in Africa recently. You've been to Ghana. We mentioned Nigeria, now Kenya. When you have to meet with the local teams, what do you think your colleagues did right in selecting the right people for the company that would fit the company culture? Like, what was that they've done really well in order to find the right people for their market?
Yeah, so we actually we have this culture of autonomy, and I think a lot of companies say that, and we've actually, I think we've borrowed a lot of our kind of corporate philosophy from Netflix and others where we've seen it work really well. But the idea is that, for like me being an exec of the business, we want to like project decision making and responsibility as wide as possible throughout the organization. So as we think about, how as a fully remote company, do you build something which is sustainable, which is true, which is responsible across 20 countries? Everybody's job in the company who hires somebody is to hire somebody who's going to make great decisions on their own, bring the expertise, and know what to do better than any of us would know ourselves.
Yes.
And that is the dynamic that I think has been kind of the hidden magic for
Yes.
PawaPay to be able to expand, and also what makes it like the most incredible place to work.
Okay. Going back to payments, how critical is getting payments right for a company that wants to expand, across Africa? And if you can just share an impact story, of a business that PowerPay helped, kind of like scale across another market, or just like make more money, sell to more customers, etc.
I mean, it's funny because it's like if I put myself in the head of a company that doesn't work in payments, and you're getting ready to launch in Africa, it's like one thing that you need to think about in this whole opportunity that you're trying to justify to the board, or trying to understand the market, or thinking about the marketing strategy and what we're going to do and how cool it's going to be. But it's also like the most fundamental, because you have to know that if you launch, one, you're going to be able to get the money for the goods or the services that you're selling, and two, that your customer is going to have a really good experience, right? That they're going to be. I mean, we've all been frustrated by like trying to make a payment and it doesn't go through, and then you're like, oh, I missed the concert tickets, or now that flight's not available, or I can't buy those shoes, and it's really irritating. But it's also very damaging to brands. So it's one of the most important things that you need to do when you're getting ready to launch a business, and you have to get it right. If I think about the success stories for us, which are really important as a company, there's probably a couple of ways to look at it. One is that, we've made our API publicly accessible and made it really easy to kind of onboard yourself. So it's great to see that like every month we have more and more small businesses which come onto the platform and are like getting their start trying to figure out how to sell online. And the other side of that is when we work with big global brands. So today I had the privilege of speaking with a customer of ours, a merchant of ours from Bolt Food, with whom we work in Kenya and across other markets. And, these relationships always take a little bit of time to be able to develop. And people are coming either because they're expanding or they need to have a different type of market access, or they are trying to add a new supplier. And you have a long discussion. And what's always great to see is that we can land with doing one small thing in one market. Yeah. And then, as was the case with Bolt, we proceeded to grow across multiple markets now across Africa and multiple payment channels. So doing rider payments, doing customer payments, doing driver payments. And you see that is the kind of thing that's really fulfilling for us, not just because it's great for the bottom line, but it means that we're doing our job in helping somebody else's business grow.
Yeah. And related to that, I'm curious to ask you on a personal note, what was surprising, what you didn't expect when you kind of like joined PawaPay as a CFO, about, the complexities of African markets, but also the opportunities, something that you really had to learn or unlearn about maybe your previous conceptions about the continents?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think every trip and every day is a bit of an education. And you never know where the surprise challenge is going to come from one day to another. And I think that's what makes it a really interesting place to work. I think the other side to that is if you look around the world, or you go to like a conference in Europe or like read the financial press in the US, it's all just really depressing. It's like, here's what's going wrong. Here's what's wrong with the economy. Congratulations. This year we were able to decrease our operating costs by 2.4%, which translated to a 1% increase in EBITDA. But it's all very negative. And you come almost right across the continent and it's an entirely different vibe. Like even just looking around this conference, it's full of people who are building things. It's full of people who are creating opportunity. It's full of people who are creating prosperity. And you can't put a price on filling your day with people who are focused on the future and what's possible rather than what's wrong. And it makes it a lot easier to deal with the friction and the challenges and the things that crop up, because you can see in a small way the impact that your business and your work is having on, building some of these like really exciting economies.
Amazing. Yeah, I love this narrative. I feel that energy too. And we can agree that the general trend line goes upward, right? Still with some volatility, and hence the questions like you're operating in 20 countries, how do you manage that volatility? By volatility, I mean, you have macro shocks, at the country level, like we had in Nigeria, like we even had in Kenya here. How do you, and you're the CFO, so you kind of like have to look at the numbers and it has to make sense. But you pretty much like expanded across Africa very aggressively in a sense. So I'm curious just to know your perspective on the scaling profitably bit and the volatility in the macro context in specific markets, how this will inform your strategy moving forward that we know is going to be positive. We know is going to be like, more market.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? I think one of the things I learned really early on was not to panic and it's a bit trite, like expect the unexpected. Yeah. So, some days I might wake up and say, I wasn't expecting to think about Zambia this much this week, or it could be another market. So I think being calm, it's a bit like standing on two surfboards in the ocean, like trying to remain balanced, and also the importance of being patient. Mm-hmm. So if you believe in the potential, and we do, we have a fast growing business that's already profitable. So we know it's possible and we see the growth of our customers. You have to be kind of relentless in pushing forward, but you also need to be realistic and what's going to be possible. And I think that's probably like a little bit of a different dynamic than you see like with tech and like the tech industry in the US and in Europe, where it's like about blitz scaling and faster and like prioritizing top line. Like you can push as hard as you want, but when you're waiting for a license from a regulator, like you're in this timeline, and at the same time, you can figure out how to shore up the rest of your business, continue growing, continue investing, and making sure you have the financial health and the kind of business health to withstand those surprises when they come through.
You actually had to establish a lot of relationship with different regulators across these countries. I don't know if you have one anecdote of a file that was passed into you and saying this is actually happening and like what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that, goes to the importance of having people on the ground. So we have at least one person, in many cases teams, in country wherever we operate. And you need to like have the people who understand the local business community, who have the relationships. So if you're making a transfer out of country A and the SWIFT doesn't arrive, what do? Well, somebody will go to the bank and knows which door to knock on and which floor the right department is sitting to be able to check. And if it doesn't happen on Monday, then we go back on Tuesday. And if it doesn't happen on Tuesday, then we go back on Wednesday. And it's about being persistent and respectful, but also like being on the ground to show that you're there and you have an understanding, and to like be quite relentless in making sure that you as a company can do everything right.
Yes, and what do you envision as PawaPay today? Because like you're pretty large, you're processing a lot of transactions. You said like 4 years to reach 1 billion, 11 months to reach 2 billion. What do you envision for the future, and how much of that growth will come from like organic versus like M&A eventually?
Oh, interesting question. So I think we've been really focused on kind of joke about it by saying to do as few things as possible really, really well. So we focus on mobile money, and actually we've gradually expanded that, where we see other types of fragmentation, for example, in Nigeria with different types of wallets, opening up bank payments. So we focused on like just doing this complicated thing for our merchants really well. And we focus until now exclusively on Africa. And that's plenty to keep us going and plenty to keep us interested and plenty to keep us excited. The growth we see coming a lot from organic. We have to think a bit at this like loop that we have to feed. So the easier we make payments across Africa, the easier we make it to move money, the more friction that we reduce for other big businesses, many of whom you've seen here, like serious global players, to come to the continent and to start to do business. And this also feeds the growth story.
Yes.
And primarily, I think, this is what our focus is and where we'll see it coming. And, today, even though we think of ourselves as a good sized company, the amount of business payments that are B2B processed on mobile money, it's fractional, right? And you can see that this industry is still growing 10 to 15% a year as a whole. The scope for business to grow within it is really big. And the last thing, and we talk about this a lot publicly, is our focus on remittance. So we really built the business as a collections focused, an internal focus on businesses operating in Africa. That's how we ramped and built our scale. Now we see the growth of remittances, which is already around $70 billion every year going into mobile money wallets. This is a place where we know we can be really strong, offer great service, and it's something that we're really excited that we've been investing in over the last several months to roll out quickly in the near term.
Totally. And definitely remittances are interesting, but we were talking with Itana previously about continental integration, right? And you mentioned B2B cross-border payments, like how do you see that segment in the future, the role that you can play in that, if you can be part of that growth, and is that growth coming now also with ASFTA and all that's happening?
FX and cross-border B2B payments in Africa and the banking infrastructure is a massive challenge, and it's hindered by regulation. It's also hindered by technical capacity for some of the banks. And the fact that we operate in all of these countries and we can reliably move money around, we see as like one of the key strengths that we can offer. But at the same time, we also know that we have to be like not just a stronger advocate, but a stronger participant and making this better. So that's about having better relationships with our banks, encouraging them to do the business that the continent is demanding, and also making sure we understand like the other trends that are happening in the continent with the growth of stable coins and the other ways of being able to move money around. It's core to unlocking the economic and business potential of everything that's happening here.
Yeah, totally. That was great, Aaron. Maybe if we have questions, of course, we do have questions from the public.
Hi.
My name is Mariana. I'm the lead researcher at Safari. I don't know how to make the question specific for you because I think we could be here all day probably. But as the CFO of a payments company, I wanted you to tell me what your biggest concerns about Treasury and currency and volatility are, like how you work that into your business, which again, I understand is probably but just whatever you want to speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking myself the same thing all of the time. Look, we operate a network of around 150 bank accounts to be able to make PawaPay work. And it's really different than if I had this job for a European company where I could log into one thing and my team could log into one thing and you push one button and you move it from place to place. And it's all like really simple. And on top of that, we're also like maintaining a wallet infrastructure with the MNOs, which is at this point probably 150, 200 different wallets. So there's a lot to think about in terms of the way that our group responsibly manages liquidity. So in that respect, we're quite conservative, which is like the most important thing as a payments company is trust. And we know where all of the dollars are, or all of the euros, or all of the kwacha at any given time. We try to be quite conservative with the way we deal with FX, and not leaving ourselves with open positions, but being really deliberate with the way that we move funds from place to place. And again, prioritizing the safety of our merchants' cash, making sure we can settle it to them as quickly as possible. One of the things that we actually launched at the end of last year, beginning of this year, which was a really big innovation, is we started offering scheduled settlement. Now, it doesn't sound that exciting, but what it means is that you've collected a bunch of money in your wallet because that t-shirt business in Kampala is really going great. And instead of having to call PowerPay or raise a ticket and saying, hey, can I have that in my bank account? Or can you turn that into euros in London for me? We now will settle those merchants every single week. So every Monday, you set a threshold for how much you want to keep in your wallet. The money comes out and you can be assured that on a timely basis, that money is going to be in whatever bank account you want to have. And that's like one of those things that tries to make it easier for our customers to be able to manage their working capital, have reliability, and kind of like reduce their overhead burden. So that's kind of on the operational side. And then, we have to be there as a partner because some businesses operate pan-Africa and understand how things work. But if you're a company that's from Europe and you've just launched a business in Tanzania, it's going great, and congratulations, you've collected $1 million worth of Tanzanian shillings.
Yes. No.
You can't just like call up your banker in the city and be like, hey, can you give me a price? It's complicated. And that's why we have like what I call our full stack treasury solution, which means we'll be able to settle you locally, or we'll be able to get you whatever currency you want in the location that you want it, so that you don't have to deal with that friction yourself.
Can I follow up? And
Sure.
I'm getting into investment question and other, but is it? Can you speak a little bit to like? So you obviously have to be a liquidity provider to an extent, so you have to be able to settle that real time and hold these currencies, right? And as you say, you have like so many of them. How much of your approach is like natural hedging by just like holding a lot of currencies, and how much do you leverage like financial instruments?
I mean, we kind of naturally hedged on everything,
because of
right? Yeah, because it'll be like, we move,
You know.
our income, we move from local currency to foreign currency on a regular basis. Of course, that like fluctuates, depending on what happens with the currencies, and sometimes they go up, more often they go down. But you get used to that. I think like when it comes to the financial instruments, you see it from time to time, and there's like things that exist in certain markets, but there's not really a way to hedge African currency exposure in a way that makes financial sense. I would say the fundamental challenge is being able to access funds reliably, is being able to transact reliably, and that's probably the greatest risk mitigation you can have. We invest a lot in having redundancy in our banking partners, having redundancy in our liquidity providers, keeping really, really close relationships with them so that we know we can always keep funds moving, look after our merchants, and also make sure that we're protecting the interests of the company as well.
Yeah. I mean,
Follow up from a merchant perspective. If a company comes to you and say, "Look, my business is growing fast. I'm in 5 different countries, and I'm in over my head about how to manage my exposure to these currencies." From your experience, both working with merchants and being an operator, what would you tell them is the way to start?
I mean, that's what's like makes being the CFO at PawaPay fun. Is I look after treasury, tax, finance, and legal. So at some point in the customer relationship, particularly if you're growing, either I'll get involved directly or a number of the teams that I work with will. And we just try to, I said earlier in our conversation, we have people locally in all of our markets. And I think it's hard to quantify, but it's a really important element of what we offer. So of course, we're not giving tax advice, we're not giving legal advice, but if you want to understand practically, what's it going to be like for me to work in Cameroon? What's it going to be like for me to work in Ghana? Or what's it going to be like for me to work in Zambia? We can talk you through that. And if you want to understand what Treasury is like, you can speak to Oliver, our amazing head of Treasury, or anybody on his team. If you want to understand what it's like to operate locally, we can put you in touch with country managers. And it's about like helping people get the context so that they feel comfortable expanding, because that's ultimately good for both of us.
And this is actually very interesting because it leads to this question where, so PowerPay has worked a lot behind the curtains, to build an amazing tech that works, that is up like most of the time. Now it's scaling very fast in terms of customer acquisition. As you try to be also a partner for your clients, how do you want to be perceived, in the next X years, let's say in the next 5 years, like really in terms of branding, positioning, but also like what message do you want to stuck in the minds of people when they hear about PowerPay? Because what you're mentioning is very interesting. Like you're talking about a partner for scaling, actually, which is basically the topic of this event. So,
I think that's pretty simple. I think we want to be known for quality. We want to be known for reliability. And we want to be known as good and transparent people to work with. So if we can do something, we will. If we can't do something, we'll tell you. And you'll always know where we stand. And like that's our philosophy for how you build long-term partnerships with companies.
Amazing. And maybe one last point, what advice would you give? Because we kind of like forgot about founders, but founders are here. Founders are probably listening as well, There are a big audience of Tech Safari. So what advice you would give founders who today want to build in Africa, who today want to expand from one African market to another? We talked about a lot of topics, just like from you, from the heart or from your experience, what general advice would you give them?
I have working like the last 10 years in tech businesses, I have a huge respect for founders and like a firsthand appreciation of the challenges, the struggle, the dedication that it takes to build something new or to build something better. I think the first thing I would say is, at least having seen different businesses and seeing PowerPay, like I said, figure out the one or maybe two or maybe three things that you're going to do really, really well. And that gives you a really great anchor for understanding who you are as a business and what it is that you need to focus on. I think the second piece is, as you're looking towards expansion, take the time to do things right. There can be a lot of pressure to get the top line growth. And you told me you were going to have 40% ARR growth and it's only 32%. I know there's pressures from investors, there's pressure sometimes for cash flow and everything else, but I promise you that 2 years from now, nobody will remember if you hit the target in February or if you hit the target in December, right? Like if you still made it as a
It's still
success,
alive, yeah.
that's the only thing that people are going to pay attention to. And then the last thing is like choose partners who share your values and your approach and that you want to work with. It's sometimes tempting or easy, you know, when you can kind of see things which you think might be the wrong idea, but maybe it'll just help me now. Those are usually expensive decisions. And I think it's really important to think about who you work with. And most obviously, if you are expanding in Africa or launching in Africa and you want a reliable partner for payments, then you should call PawaPay.
Amazing. And with this last message, very clear, very simple. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks a lot.
That was
Really a pleasure
nice.
to be here.